It began with a rumor few believed and even fewer dared discuss. Deep within the archives surrounding Balmoral, historians quietly reopened records that had remained untouched for decades. What they uncovered would leave even the king himself struggling for words. A forgotten agreement, hidden behind layers of tradition and silence, was suddenly back in the spotlight, and its implications reached far beyond Scotland. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For years, Balmoral had stood as more than just a beloved royal retreat. To generations of the House of Windsor, it represented continuity, memory, and a connection to the past that few institutions in the modern world could claim. Countless stories had emerged from its hills and valleys, yet many believed the estate had already surrendered all of its secrets. That assumption, however, would soon be shattered by a discovery that nobody expected. According to reports circulating among royal historians, a team of researchers had been granted unusually rare access to records that had remained sealed for decades. Such permissions were uncommon, and insiders suggested that extraordinary precautions surrounded the review process. Palace officials were said to be quietly monitoring developments, though very few people knew precisely what the historians were searching for. At first, many assumed it was simply another routine examination of documents connected to the estate's long and complicated history. But whispers began spreading that something far more significant had emerged. Those whispers quickly attracted the attention of respected royal experts, several of whom reportedly described the discovery as extraordinary. Suddenly, conversations that had once been confined to historians and archivists began reaching palace circles. Yet even then, information remained tightly controlled. King Charles himself was said to have received only limited briefings about the findings. That detail alone raised eyebrows among seasoned royal observers. Why would such caution be necessary? And why would details surrounding an old agreement require such remarkable secrecy? The mystery only deepened as questions multiplied. Some insiders quietly wondered whether the document had been intentionally shielded from public knowledge. Others questioned whether previous generations had deliberately chosen silence in order to protect something larger than themselves. Whatever the explanation, one thing became increasingly clear: this was no ordinary historical curiosity. The atmosphere surrounding the discovery had begun to change, and those closest to royal affairs reportedly sensed that the implications stretched far beyond Balmoral itself. As speculation intensified, palace insiders allegedly found themselves facing an uncomfortable possibility. If the agreement proved authentic, it might force historians to revisit decades of accepted royal history. Long-standing assumptions could suddenly be challenged. Established narratives might require rewriting. And perhaps most astonishing of all, a hidden chapter connected to one of the monarchy's most influential periods could finally be brought into the light. For King Charles, whose reign had already been marked by enormous responsibilities and unexpected challenges, the growing mystery presented yet another burden. Yet at this stage, even he reportedly knew only fragments of the truth. The full story remained buried beneath layers of tradition and silence, waiting for historians to complete their painstaking work. Few could have imagined just how deeply those forgotten pages would reach into the past, or how profoundly they would reshape the understanding of royal legacy itself. But the agreement itself was only the beginning, because its origins stretch back to one of the most influential chapters in royal history. Long before modern royal controversies dominated headlines, a promise was quietly made among those entrusted with protecting Balmoral's future. Decades later, that forgotten understanding would emerge from the shadows, bringing with it questions that had never truly disappeared. As historians continued piecing together the mystery surrounding the newly uncovered agreement, their attention shifted away from the present and deep into the past. What they found suggested that the story did not begin with King Charles, nor even with Queen Elizabeth II. Instead, its roots appeared to stretch back through earlier generations of the royal family, reaching into a period when Balmoral was regarded not simply as a treasured residence, but as something infinitely more important. Those who studied the records increasingly came to believe that the estate represented an enduring symbol of continuity itself, a place whose meaning could never be measured merely in land or stone. That realization transformed the investigation. According to several historians familiar with the material, references buried within old correspondence and administrative records pointed toward private understandings shared among senior royals. These understandings were not necessarily formal in the modern sense, yet they appeared to reveal something remarkable. Generations before the current era, influential members of the monarchy had quietly agreed upon certain principles surrounding Balmoral's future. The language found within those documents suggested themes of duty, stewardship, and preservation, values that had long defined the institution itself. Royal scholars began describing Balmoral as a bridge between generations, a place where memories and responsibilities passed from one reign to another. To them, the estate represented something sacred within the wider story of the monarchy. That perspective, however, raised a troubling question. If these understandings were so significant, why had they remained hidden for so many years? Why had so few people outside a narrow circle of historians and palace officials ever heard whispers of their existence? The debate quickly intensified. Some researchers argued that previous generations may have intentionally chosen discretion, believing that certain matters were better preserved in silence. Others believed the secrecy had served a larger purpose, protecting traditions that were never meant to become subjects of public controversy. But despite those theories, nobody could fully explain why references to the agreement seemed to vanish from later historical discussions. It was as though entire chapters had quietly slipped beneath the surface, waiting patiently for the right moment to return. As more evidence surfaced, long-held assumptions surrounding Balmoral's history began to face unexpected challenges. Narratives that had been accepted for decades suddenly appeared incomplete. Certain decisions, once attributed to personal preference, now seemed connected to principles established much earlier. Even seasoned historians admitted they were being forced to reconsider aspects of royal history they had believed were already settled. For King Charles, who remained largely unaware of the full scope of the discoveries unfolding around him, the implications would eventually become impossible to ignore. Yet among the researchers themselves, excitement was increasingly accompanied by disbelief, because the further they traced the origins of the agreement, the more they realized that its age was not the most astonishing aspect of the story. In fact, what truly left experts stunned was something far more unexpected and infinitely more revealing. Yet what stunned researchers most was not when the agreement was created, but who had insisted it remain protected. As faded signatures and handwritten notes came into focus, historians realized they were looking at far more than an old record. Familiar names appeared across the pages, transforming what seemed like a forgotten archive into a revelation capable of shaking royal assumptions. The deeper researchers ventured into the sealed material, the more extraordinary the picture became. What had started as the rediscovery of a single agreement was now unfolding into something much larger. Names that had defined previous eras of the monarchy began appearing throughout the records with remarkable consistency. References linked one generation to another, revealing that the matter surrounding Balmoral had never been isolated. Instead, it appeared to have been part of a carefully maintained understanding that stretched across decades, quietly passing through the hands of those entrusted with safeguarding the crown's traditions. Historians were particularly struck by the amount of detail preserved, notes attached to correspondence, annotations written in the margins, and supporting references found within separate files all seemed to point toward one undeniable conclusion. Those involved had never treated Balmoral as merely a residence or a family possession. Time and again, the language reflected themes of continuity, responsibility, and long-term stewardship. Whatever agreement had existed, it had clearly been approached with immense seriousness by senior figures of previous reigns. The implications of those discoveries sent waves of excitement through historical circles. Experts who had dedicated entire careers to studying royal history reportedly expressed surprise at how much information had survived. Many had long assumed that if such understandings had ever existed, evidence would have been fragmented or incomplete. Instead, the records appeared unusually thorough. That realization only deepened the mystery. Why preserve such detailed material while simultaneously ensuring it remained hidden from wider knowledge? Determined to avoid speculation, historians spent weeks examining every page with extraordinary care. Authenticity became their highest priority. Documents were cross-referenced against archival records. Handwritten notes were compared with existing materials. Dates, signatures, and historical references were scrutinized repeatedly. According to those familiar with the process, researchers wanted absolute certainty before presenting any conclusions. The stakes were simply too high for assumptions or mistakes. As their investigation continued, additional documents surfaced, strengthening confidence that the agreement had indeed existed. Each new discovery seemed to reinforce the previous one, gradually removing any lingering doubts. Yet outside academic circles, caution prevailed. Reports suggested that palace insiders reacted with measured restraint. Rather than rushing to embrace the findings, those within royal circles reportedly approached the matter carefully, aware that any revelation involving Balmoral carried profound symbolic importance. Meanwhile, speculation began spreading about one question above all others: what would King Charles think? For a monarch whose personal connection to Balmoral had been shaped by decades of memories and family traditions, the answer carried enormous significance. Some observers believed he would welcome the discoveries as an affirmation of the values passed down through generations. Others wondered whether the implications might prove more emotionally complicated than anyone anticipated. By now, anticipation had reached remarkable levels. Historians continued debating what the revelations truly meant, while palace circles maintained their cautious silence. Yet behind that silence, preparations were quietly underway. Because after weeks of painstaking verification and endless discussions among experts, the moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. But while experts debated the significance, the findings were finally delivered to the king himself. Few expected the moment to carry such emotional weight. Yet when the verified findings reached King Charles, those familiar with royal traditions described a scene marked by disbelief and profound reflection. After weeks of painstaking examinations and endless discussions among historians, the conclusions were finally assembled and presented in their complete form. By then, the mystery that had begun with whispers inside archival rooms had transformed into something far more significant. What lay before the king was no longer a collection of scattered references or fragments buried beneath decades of silence. According to those familiar with the process, historians had reached a level of confidence that left little room for doubt. The agreement was real, its origins had been traced, and its preservation across generations appeared deliberate rather than accidental. For King Charles, the moment reportedly carried a significance that went beyond historical curiosity. Balmoral had occupied a special place throughout his life, connected not only to the institution he now led, but also to deeply personal memories and family traditions. Reports suggested that the findings affected him profoundly. Those close to royal affairs described a mood of quiet contemplation, as though the discovery had reopened a chapter of history that had never truly been forgotten, merely placed beyond view by time itself. Naturally, palace advisors moved carefully. Every page, every notation, and every supporting document was reportedly reviewed with extraordinary attention. Caution remained paramount. The monarchy had always understood the weight carried by historical revelations, particularly those connected to places as symbolically important as Balmoral. No one wished to rush toward conclusions. Instead, advisors and experts reportedly focused on ensuring that every aspect of the findings was understood within its proper context. What made the discovery especially remarkable was how seamlessly the agreement appeared to fit within the broader historical record. Rather than contradicting established history, it seemed to strengthen and clarify certain decisions made by previous generations. Experts noted that the language found within the documents reflected principles that had long guided the monarchy, ideas centered on continuity, stewardship, and responsibility. In many ways, the agreement appeared less like an anomaly and more like a missing piece of a much larger story. Historians repeatedly stressed the importance of preserving perspective. They argued that understanding the document required more than simply reading its contents. It required understanding the values and traditions that had shaped those who created it. Without that context, they warned, its deeper meaning could easily be misunderstood. And so discussions quickly expanded beyond the agreement itself, turning toward what it might represent in the modern era. Questions emerged that few had anticipated. Did the discovery carry implications for how Balmoral's legacy would be viewed in the future? Could it reshape public understanding of earlier reigns? More importantly, did the agreement reveal something profound about the responsibilities inherited by King Charles himself? These conversations gradually from academic circles into royal commentary, where speculation intensified with each passing day. Observers sensed that the revelation held deeply personal meaning for the king. There was a growing belief that this discovery represented more than a historical correction. It appeared to connect generations separated by time, reaffirming principles that had survived changing eras and countless challenges. Yet even as discussions spread and interpretations multiplied, many experts remained convinced that the most astonishing truth had yet to emerge. Because despite everything historians had uncovered, despite the emotions stirred within palace walls and the questions now echoing across royal circles, one extraordinary detail still remained hidden beneath the surface. However, the most remarkable aspect of the agreement had not yet been fully understood. To historians, the discovery represented something far greater than a forgotten document. It appeared to answer questions that had puzzled researchers for generations, completing a story that many believed would forever remain unfinished. As the significance of the agreement became clearer, excitement within historical circles reached extraordinary levels. What had once been dismissed as speculation or little more than fragments of royal folklore was now being viewed through an entirely different lens. Experts who had spent decades studying the monarchy began describing the findings as nothing short of a breakthrough. For many, the agreement represented a missing chapter that had finally returned to its rightful place, bringing with it answers that generations of researchers had searched for but never expected to find. The revelation began connecting events that had long seemed isolated or difficult to explain. Certain decisions made by previous generations suddenly appeared less mysterious. Actions once attributed to personal preferences now seemed rooted in principles established much earlier than anyone had imagined. Historians found themselves revisiting old records with renewed purpose, uncovering links that had previously escaped attention. Piece by piece, the puzzle that had frustrated scholars for decades was beginning to fit together. Praise quickly followed for those who had preserved the records so carefully. Researchers noted that without the extraordinary efforts of archivists and generations of custodians, much of the evidence might have disappeared forever. The survival of these documents was viewed by many as a remarkable act of historical stewardship. More importantly, it allowed scholars to reconstruct a narrative that had remained incomplete for far too long. At the heart of the discussions was a growing realization that Balmoral itself needed to be understood differently. For years, many had viewed the estate primarily through the lens of family tradition and personal affection. But new interpretations began emerging. Historians increasingly describe Balmoral as something deeper, a symbol of continuity and responsibility, a place where principles established by earlier generations quietly shaped decisions far into the future. The agreement appeared to reinforce that understanding, giving fresh meaning to the estate's role within royal history. Naturally, debates followed. Scholars questioned how much influence the agreement may have exercised over later events. Had it guided decisions in ways never publicly acknowledged? Had previous monarchs quietly upheld principles inherited from their predecessors without revealing the full story? These questions generated intense interest, and with every new discussion, curiosity only grew stronger. Royal researchers from across Britain and beyond reportedly turned their attention toward the discovery. Archives once considered familiar were re-examined. Forgotten references received fresh scrutiny. Interest in Balmoral's history expanded rapidly, drawing attention from experts who previously believed the subject had already yielded all its secrets. Suddenly, an estate that had always occupied a cherished place in royal life became the center of one of the most fascinating historical discussions in recent memory. The public, too, became increasingly captivated. Questions that had once belonged solely to scholars now found their way into wider conversations. People wanted to know what the agreement truly meant. They wanted to understand why it had remained hidden and why its rediscovery seemed to carry such profound emotional weight. Yet while historians celebrated the discovery and debated its significance, another story was quietly unfolding behind palace walls. Because if the findings astonished those who studied the past, their impact upon those living within the monarchy proved even more extraordinary. And as whispers spread through royal circles, observers began sensing that the reactions inside the institution itself might reveal truths far more compelling than the documents alone. But if the historians were astonished, the reaction inside royal circles proved even more revealing. Behind palace walls, whispers quickly replaced certainty. Those who had spent years studying royal history suddenly found themselves confronting a discovery few had imagined would ever come to light. In the days that followed the revelation, the atmosphere surrounding the monarchy reportedly shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. The excitement that had consumed historians outside palace circles was matched by something very different among those closest to the institution itself. Curiosity grew, certainly, but so did caution. Senior advisors were said to be studying the findings with remarkable care, aware that discoveries connected to Balmoral carried meaning far beyond simple questions of history. The documents had already altered scholarly understanding. What remained uncertain was how they might affect the monarchy's own view of its past. According to those familiar with royal affairs, conversations inside palace circles became increasingly focused on interpretation rather than disbelief. The evidence had been examined, the authenticity had been verified, and the significance of the agreement could no longer be dismissed. Instead, attention turned toward understanding what it truly represented. Royal historians and advisors reportedly found themselves debating the broader implications, exploring how a document hidden for generations had managed to preserve ideas that seemed to echo across decades of royal life. The discovery naturally invited comparisons with other major moments in archival history. Experts recalled occasions when long-forgotten letters or records had transformed understanding of earlier reigns. Yet many observers privately acknowledged that this case felt different. Unlike isolated pieces of correspondence, the Balmoral Agreement appeared to touch something deeper. It did not merely add a new chapter to royal history. It seemed to strengthen themes that had always existed beneath the surface: continuity, responsibility, and the quiet passing of values from one generation to the next. That realization only reinforced Balmoral's symbolic importance. Historians had long described the estate as a place deeply woven into the identity of the monarchy, but now that understanding appeared more profound than ever. The agreement seemed to confirm that previous generations had regarded Balmoral not simply as a beloved retreat, but as something worthy of protection and careful stewardship. To many experts, this discovery offered powerful evidence that the estate occupied a unique place within the story of the crown itself. As discussions continued, specialists repeatedly emphasized the remarkable continuity revealed by the records. Despite changing eras and evolving circumstances, the principles reflected within the agreement appeared strikingly consistent. Generations separated by decades seemed united by common ideas and shared responsibilities. That sense of continuity fascinated researchers and palace observers alike, because it suggested that the monarchy's deepest traditions often survived not through grand declarations, but through quiet understandings carefully preserved over time. Yet even as debates intensified and curiosity spread, attention increasingly focused on one individual above all others. King Charles had already received the findings. Reports suggested that he had been deeply affected by what he learned. But those closest to royal affairs understood that his response carried significance extending far beyond personal emotions. The monarchy itself now stood at a crossroads between memory and meaning, between history and legacy. And so, while historians continued their discussions and palace insiders quietly exchanged theories, anticipation began building around the king's reflections, because many sensed that his reaction would ultimately determine how this remarkable discovery would be remembered. Would it remain simply an extraordinary chapter in royal history, or would it reveal something much larger, something capable of reminding the nation why the past still mattered? And that response would reveal why this discovery mattered far beyond history books. What emerged from the archives was not merely a story about the past. It was a reminder that royal legacies are built through generations of promises, sacrifices, and traditions designed to outlive those who created them. By this stage, the significance of the Balmoral Agreement had grown far beyond the excitement surrounding its discovery. Historians increasingly believed they were witnessing something much deeper than the unearthing of forgotten records. To them, the documents represented a powerful affirmation of values that had shaped the monarchy across generations: duty, stewardship, responsibility. These themes appeared repeatedly throughout the material, reinforcing the idea that the crown had always depended not merely on titles or ceremonies, but on an unbroken commitment to preserving traditions entrusted by those who came before. That understanding resonated strongly with experts who had spent years studying the institution. They emphasized that continuity had long been one of the monarchy's greatest strengths. Reigns changed, circumstances evolved, and generations passed, yet certain principles endured. According to historians, the agreement seemed to provide remarkable evidence of that continuity. It revealed how responsibilities inherited by one generation quietly became obligations accepted by the next. In many ways, The discovery illustrated the invisible threads connecting the past, the present. Balmoral itself once again stood at the center of those discussions. For countless people, the estate had always symbolized personal memories associated with Queen Elizabeth II and the wider royal family. Yet the newly uncovered records suggested its significance reached even further. Historians increasingly describe Balmoral as a place deeply intertwined with royal identity itself, a symbol of permanence in a world constantly changing. The agreement appeared to confirm that previous generations had viewed the estate through the same lens, treating it not merely as a cherished home, but as something worthy of protection for future heirs. The discovery also renewed appreciation for those who had preserved history so carefully. Scholars praised the generations of archivists and custodians whose dedication ensured that these remarkable records survived. Without their efforts, an important chapter might have disappeared forever. Instead, the past had been given a voice once again, allowing modern historians to understand the monarchy with greater clarity and depth. Many experts could not help noticing striking parallels between the principles reflected within the agreement and the values associated with Queen Elizabeth II herself. Her devotion to duty, her emphasis on continuity, and her lifelong commitment to preserving the institution seemed remarkably consistent with the themes emerging from the documents. For some observers, the similarities felt almost poetic, as though the late Queen's philosophy had been shaped by traditions that stretched back further than many had ever realized. Reports suggested that King Charles regarded the revelation with considerable seriousness. Those familiar with royal affairs believed he understood that the agreement represented far more than an interesting historical footnote. It served as a reminder of the obligations carried by every monarch and every generation. Royal commentators soon described the discovery as one of the most remarkable developments in years, not because it changed history, but because it revealed how deeply history continued to influence the present. Yet amid all the praise and fascination, one unsettling thought lingered in the minds of many observers. What if these events were not simply coincidences? What if the values preserved within those forgotten pages had quietly shaped decisions for decades without anyone fully recognizing their influence? Yet one final realization would leave many wondering whether history had been quietly guiding events all along. In the end, it was not controversy or conflict that defined the moment, but silence. After historians completed their work and the significance of the long-sealed Balmoral Agreement became undeniable, King Charles was left confronting a truth that had patiently waited decades to be rediscovered. With months of careful examination finally complete, historians reached the end of a journey few had anticipated when the first whispers surrounding the forgotten agreement began to emerge. Every signature had been reviewed. Every note had been examined. Every lingering question had been subjected to the highest standards of scrutiny. What had once seemed impossible was now undeniable. The agreement was authentic, its preservation had been deliberate, and its importance had become impossible to dismiss. The mystery that had begun deep within the archives had transformed into one of the most fascinating royal revelations in recent memory. Royal experts wasted little time in recognizing the magnitude of what had been uncovered. Many described the discovery as historic, not because it overturned everything historians thought they knew, but because it completed a story that had remained unfinished for generations. The agreement provided clarity where uncertainty had once existed. It offered context where assumptions had previously dominated. Above all, it reminded both scholars and the public that history often guards its greatest truths with patience, revealing them only when the time is right. Reports suggested that King Charles himself spent considerable time reflecting upon the deeper meaning behind the discovery. For a monarch whose life had been intertwined with Balmoral since childhood, the revelation reportedly carried emotional weight beyond mere historical significance. Those close to royal affairs sensed that he understood something profoundly important. The agreement represented more than the wishes of previous generations. It represented trust, it represented continuity, and perhaps most importantly, it represented the responsibilities inherited by every generation entrusted with preserving the crown. As discussions surrounding the discovery continued, one thing became increasingly clear. Rather than diminishing Balmoral's place within royal history, the revelations had strengthened it. The estate's legacy appeared more powerful than ever. Historians, royal commentators, and palace insiders alike increasingly viewed Balmoral as a symbol of enduring values passed carefully from one generation to another. its significance had not faded with time. If anything, the years had only deepened its meaning. There was also something profoundly moving about the way the agreement connected the past with the present. Figures separated by decades suddenly seemed linked through shared principles and common responsibilities. Previous reigns no longer appeared distant or disconnected. Instead, they became part of a continuous story stretching across generations. The discovery served as a reminder that the monarchy's strength had always depended upon continuity, memory, and the quiet preservation of traditions capable of surviving changing times. Perhaps that was the greatest lesson hidden within the archives. In an age defined by headlines and constant change, the story of the Balmoral Agreement demonstrated that not every chapter of history announces itself immediately. Some truths wait patiently, some legacies reveal themselves slowly, and some traditions endure because generations choose to protect them, even when few understand their significance at the time. For many observers, the discovery ultimately reinforced something timeless about the monarchy itself. Institutions survive because memories are preserved. Legacies endure because responsibilities are accepted. And history, no matter how deeply buried, possesses a remarkable way of returning when its lessons are needed most. Because sometimes the most powerful chapters in royal history are not the ones written in public, but the ones that wait quietly for the right moment to be remembered. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.